Shalom, good afternoon from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Mr. Lowell Joseph Gallen, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited, established in the United States of God of Israel, bless America, in New York State in 1981, now celebrating our 43rd year, and in a few weeks, our 44th year. Today is Thursday, December 5th, 2024, in the Gregorian calendar, and it is the fourth day of the ninth Israelite Hebrew month of Kislev in the Hebrew Israelite calendar year 5785. Welcome to episode 77 of our monthly Root and Branch Association Erev Rav and Amalek Research Fellowship seminars. The chairman of the fellowship and the lecturer, in this case, we also have a guest speaker. I'll tell you about him in a minute. For the seminars and the fellowship is Rabbi Hanania Weitzman of Jerusalem, Israel, and we're most honored to have as our program chair Advocate Lawrence Gordon of Kobe, Japan. Our guest speaker for today is Rabbi Raphael Zendro of Baltimore, Maryland. And what I have written for him from Hanania, Rabbi Zendro, is currently a real estate broker in Baltimore. He is originally from Providence, Rhode Island. Rabbi Zendro went to Ner Yisrael Yeshiva in Baltimore for high school, Beit Midrash, and Kollel. This year he started, and for those who don't know, Kollel is Yeshiva studies for married students. For the people out there who don't understand what that means. Beit Midrash is like a study hall. And if I mistranslated it, Hanania will correct it. This year, he started a nonprofit, Machon Mishpat Tzedek, which would mean the Institute for Righteous Law, I think. Again, Hanania may translate it differently, which primarily focuses on dispute resolution, mediation, and arbitration. One of the disputes he has been trying to, quote unquote, resolve over the last few years is the rulings of local rabbis related to vaccines. Please support all of our work. You'll see the links below. And now, without further ado, and we welcome our guests from Japan, France, the United States, that's what I see, and Israel. Rabbi Zendro and Rabbi Weissman, Hanania and Raphael, it's all yours.
Thank you, Lowell. Welcome, everybody. Rabbi Zendro, I've been wanting to have you as a guest on my program for quite some time already. I'm glad that you finally agreed. I'd like to start. It's an
honor to be here.
Thank you. I'd like to start with a couple of pre-trial questions, if you will. First, can you tell us just a little bit about the background story about your encounters with the rabbis in Baltimore, how this all started? Because this is actually pre-COVID. Reading through your extensive work, it's actually pre-COVID. Could you give us just a little bit of the some summary of how you got involved with this and just what's been going on?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Big honor to be here. We've been pen pals for a long time. I think I guess this is the first time we're actually speaking.
Yes.
So it's really great. Yeah, so this goes back quite a while. I still remember my first conversation, someone who enlightened me with the whole concept that vaccines might not be what they claim them to be. And I asked all the basic questions. Okay, what about polio? What about these other diseases? How do you know they cause autism? How do you know they are so dangerous? So I got some information. I always tell people one of the first things that I did, one person recommended, was the book Dissolving Illusions. Suzanne Humphries and Roman Bystrionic wrote that book. So the reason why that's so important is because, like, the understanding that I had originally, which I think a lot of people did, is that I know that they're not safe. There's definitely something behind it. You can't know for sure. But I figured, but the benefit, there's all these terrible diseases out there. Obviously, there must be some point to it. But then when you start reading the history, that wait, these diseases really aren't that bad, and they talk about how the mortality rates drop, even the diseases that used to be pretty bad, measles, whooping cough, they used to be deadly, 100 years ago. But then as sanitation improved, the mortality rates dropped. So really, the The death rate was practically zero even by the time the vaccine was invented for many of these. So now the whole basis of doing it is gone, because like, no, there's no threat, there's no real reason that why you have to do it. So now what's the point of, even if there's just a small risk, what's the point of getting into any risk if there's no point in doing it? So that's how pretty much it started. And then I started asking questions. I had emailed the CDC, I emailed different rabbanim, different doctors, and just from being I wanted to have honest discussions with people, and I really wanted to know what the answers were. I even emailed Roman Bystrianyk, one of the authors of that book. I wanted to verify, he had those charts with the mortality rates. So where'd you get that from? I want to see where you got it from. So he, show me some links that, these charts, these, it's public record. They have these, the mortality rates of every year for different causes of death. So I verified that. So the people who are on one side were very happy to talk. They always give the information, but the people who are all on the other side barely gave you any time, didn't give you any information, were very frustrated if you even asked any questions. So it became clear very early on which side was right. So I just kept going from there. I guess as a little bit of an introduction, something that I was thinking about recently is that, there's a lot of things we learn from the whole story of Mitzrayim, the Shibud Mitzrayim, Yetzias Mitzrayim. A lot of mitzvahs are Zeicher Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's a very important thing, obviously, that we always keep in mind. But one point, a small point, literally a small point, is something that we learned from Kinim, the lice. There was the third Makkah, the third plague, Tam Svardei Kinim. So back at that point in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, there was a big debate going on between Paro and his magicians, and then between Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron, and the Yidden and Akash Baruch Hu. The debate was, does God exist? Basically, does God exist? Does God run the world, or does Paro run the world? So that was the big debate, and it was very interesting that by the third plague, that you had the blood, you had the frogs, and then you had the lice. By the lice, it says that the Khartoumim said it's Etzba Elokim. They realized that it was the finger of God. So that they were convinced. That's very amazing. So I was thinking about that. We could learn an important lesson from there. Is that even the blood was a good proof that God exists, right? Why did it have to wait until the third plague? So I was thinking that when you're debating somebody, when you're trying to convince somebody of something, you have to work within their mindset. So the Egyptians, they were stuck in their mindset. Their level of emunah obviously wasn't that high. They were stuck with their whole lifestyle. So they had their magic. So then we got to the point of those little lice. They said, "Oh, it's so small, it's impossible. The magic can't work. Something that small." Then they realized that proved to them that God is there. It was from God. So what I learned from throughout discussions with all these different people, whether it was doctors, Jewish, non-Jewish, rabbis, either way, you can come with piles of evidence. When you're dealing with a person who has a healthy level of emunah, and they're not brainwashed, they're not stuck in their mindset. There's 100 ways to prove it. The MS is on our side, the truth is on our side. When you have the truth, you can prove the truth in 100 different ways. But when you're dealing with somebody who's not in a healthy situation, you have to figure out what is their mindset. What's the point that's going to get through to them? So with the Egyptians, it was the Kinim. The Kinim finally got through to them, and they were convinced at that point. So what I found interesting was that all the scientific arguments, it didn't help that much. It had a very little effect on most people. What got through to people was when I realized that Rav Moshe Feinstein has certain shuvas, and I worked on those for a while, and then these other quotes that are mentioned from Rav Moshe Feinstein. So I spent a lot of time on that, because when you're talking to a rabbi, that's something that we all agree on. We agree that there is something called Das Torah, and it's a very important part of our, Judaism. We all believe in Das Torah, and we all agree that Rav Moshe Feinstein had a extremely high level of Das Torah. So when you're talking to these rabbis or anyone really, and you start quoting them, here, look what Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said, and it goes against their whole, every assumption that they've been making. It basically, like, their head exploded. So they had to respond. Otherwise you bring other arguments, they basically will ignore you. They could have ignored everything, but this was when we went through the things that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein were discussing, that really got the conversation started, and that got them thinking a little bit. So,
But it seems
Can you
like you
still
hit a
hear-
wall at some point, right? You were able to start the conversation finally with these rabbis, but eventually they started stonewalling you.
yeah, it's still, yeah, you're not going to convince them necessarily. I mean, it was a good try. It was definitely a good try. It got them thinking a little bit, but eventually, like, no, they wouldn't give in. I don't think I'm wasting my time. I think it was helpful to get it, these conversations, let's say through emails, in writing. It's helpful for everyone else, so everyone else can see, okay, these are the people who are supporting vaccination, and this is how they're responding. The responses are, clearly not responding to what Rav Moshe Feinstein was saying, so maybe if we have time, we can go through a little bit of what Rav Moshe Feinstein said and how they responded. It's kind of amusing.
It's a little bit, maybe it's too technical for our audience. I want to just get
Okay.
really like the Cliff Notes version. I want to really talk more about,
Okay.
Right now, let's sort of fast forward to the present after all these years of sort of trying to convince these rabbis and seemingly
Yeah.
not getting very far. You didn't want to really bring this to public attention for a while. And what changed that you decided now that you want to basically put them before the court to public opinion? What changed in recent times that made you now ready to take that step?
Court of public opinion. I mean, I was always a little more vocal than most people would be comfortable. Well, the question is, yeah. So what changed? That's a good question. I think COVID helped. In other words, everyone has their level of what they're comfortable with. So 10 or 20 years ago, there was so much political pressure against it. It's more difficult. There's just so much more pressure. So I don't think it's that difficult now. Today, it's just not. I don't think it's that hard at all to speak out publicly, because we have the majority. The majority of people agree with us. It's still, people are still reluctant to talk about it publicly, but it's much easier now than it was before. So I don't know. It was kind of just a gradual.
Okay, so what are basically the claims that you're making against the rabbis of Baltimore mainly? What are the claims that you're making? Let's imagine that we're having sort of a mock trial, right? So you're one of the litigants here. What's the basis of your case that you're bringing against the rabbis of Baltimore? And you want to name names? I think that would be appropriate, because I assume it's not all the rabbis of Baltimore, right? It's a subset of them. So what's really going on here?
Right. Well, if you want, you could post. Are you going to share the things that I wrote up? I wrote up.
I actually shared it in the past, but just
Okay.
give it sum it up for our audience about what this case really is. Like, what are we talking about
here? Okay. To summarize, well, there was a few. I guess there's a few main points. There was this letter that went out. That's really I think that's like the main point of how it all started. It was in 2018. 2018, it's called the Vata Rabbanim. So many of the Rabbanim have this group. They call it the Vata Rabbanim, and they put out this letter. And I mean, if you read it, it's a bizarre letter. It says that, and this is when during the measles, the whole measles was coming out. Everyone was terrified because there was a few people that had a rash and a fever. So they came out with this letter publicly. It said, we had a meeting. This is what happened. They said a certain date. I forgot the exact date in 2018. It said, yesterday, the Vata Rabbanim met. We had a meeting, and it was unanimous. We all decided that every single child and adult must get vaccinated with every single vaccine that the CDC recommends. And then it even had a link to the CDC, to the charts on the CDC website. And it said, and if you don't, it said, and if you're a danger, it's a danger to society. And if you don't follow the schedule, exactly, then you say you should not go, you can't send your kids to school, you can't go to shul, and you can't even go anywhere in public. But it would be great if I know there are people that generate fear of the risk of vaccines, but hopefully people can get over that and you can get vaccinated, and we'll be happy to have you join the rest of us in the community once you comply. So it didn't take long to discover that that wasn't exactly true what that letter stated. That meeting, there was a meeting, but they didn't talk about that. They maybe talked about MMR, and maybe they talked about they should encourage people to get the MMR, but they never talked about any of the other vaccines. They never talked about kicking people out of shul and not going anywhere in public. So the whole thing, it was just not true. So I've been pressing them on that. As far as I know, I checked maybe a month or two ago, I assume it's still up, posted on this website called Baltimore Jewish Life, I think, .com or .org, I forgot. So I've been pressing them on that. And then another big issue was there was a din Torah that took place even before that in 2015. So, and I went through that in the letter that I wrote up, tearing that apart. It just doesn't make any sense. I can't understand it, and they won't respond. So, I mean, my goal, anybody can write a strongly worded letter, right? Strongly worded letter. It's nice, it helps, it just shows your position, but it's not really going to accomplish much. The main purpose of that was really to share it with people, to discuss, to read it, and discuss what are the points that we came out. What's the final questions that we need to get answers to, and the community, everyone has to get together. I think people need to speak up. That's the most important part, is people need to speak up. If we have, in the numbers, and we have the numbers, people have to get out there and do it, and pick up the phone and do it. Then it's political pressure. That's really what the bottom line behind it. And that was that Rav that I spoke to. For a couple of years, I've been thinking, my train of thought was maybe to really have another din Torah, which could make sense, because one of the main purposes of Beis Din is make sure that people are not doing anything that's usher and not doing anything that's unsafe. And that, the vaccine question definitely fits something that Beis Din should take up. And there have been Dinei Torah on this issue, which I also wrote about. Both of them ruled that schools should not throw children out if they're not vaccinated. So that was another question to bring up. Why are they ignoring the legal precedent of those cases? But that was my train of thought. Maybe we should have another din Torah to really, figure out the whole, talk to experts on both sides and really have a whole, debate on the issues. But this Rav told me, no, it didn't seem like that's not going to go anywhere. Just go to the court of public opinion. And I think there was some truth to that. We just got to, it's all political. One of the main reasons these Rabbanim are, in their position the way they are, is that there's so much pressure. Like a Rav of a Kehillah, there's a lot of doctors and lawyers. So the Kehillah pays their salary. If they come out against vaccines, they're going to have a few of their, rich donors who pay their salary. They're going to get angry. They might leave the community, that Kehillah, or they might get fired themselves. So there's a lot of pressure. But if there's political pressure the other way, making, I know we learned from Eliyahu at Har Carmel that you're allowed to make a late sunus when it comes to Avodah Zarah. So we can make them look bad. They're obviously making mistakes. They're not answering the questions. It's amusing. Some of the things they said are just amusing. If they look bad,
I don't see how they could be fit to lead a community if they're unwilling to say what's true, even at the expense of people's safety and lives. The goal should not be simply to get them to make a statement. If these people are giving into that sort of pressure. We're not talking about extreme pressure. We're talking about, as you mentioned, some rich donors maybe leaving the shul. That's all it takes for these rabbis to falsify the Torah and endanger people's lives physically and spiritually. They're not fit to lead a community, period.
It's a problem. Yeah, it is.
I mean, that really needs to be the what people are talking about. Not, let's get the rabbis to make a statement, maybe change their position. If this is what it takes, then they don't belong as serving as rabbis altogether.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know if my goal is to get them fired.
My
But
goal
if
is to
that
get them
happens-
fired. Frankly, my goal is we might not share the same goals. My goal is to get them fired and ideally prosecuted for their crimes against the Jewish people.
Yeah,
These
if
people
that
have
happens, I
committed
mean,
a lot of harm.
yeah, I mean, one step at a time. My thing is, let's expose this. It's a big problem, and then yeah, from there, if they lose their job over it, then so be it. Yeah, I mean, but we have to stand up for what's right. I mean,
Well, are there people working with you? Because you said several times that there is a majority of people that side with you on the issue. So are you a one-man show, or are there other people that are also voicing these concerns and putting pressure on them?
Yeah, there's several people in the community that definitely agree. Some speak up more than others, but I think, yeah, Bli Neder, I'm gonna hopefully practice what I preach, and right after this, I would like to, gather the troops. Yeah, there's a few people that are willing to do it. So you have to work together. We got to organize. You have to discuss how it's going to work, and that was part of the goal, like I said, of writing this whole letter to organize it. So people can see, okay, here's the points. Here's what we're going to tell them, and we're just start calling them. If they get I can only make a certain number of phone calls and get on their nerves, but if there's 20 or 50 people getting on their nerves, that's a different thing. So the more people that do it, I think it'll make I think you make a difference. I mean, you talked about I think you've spoken about by the ego or by the Meraglim, the spies. So there were cases throughout history there where it could have been preventable. Had more people spoken up, maybe they could have prevented that. But there were just maybe one or two individuals. It wasn't enough. And I always have this discussion with people. So Hur was someone who spoke up against the ego, right? But they killed him. So the argument against speaking up is, well, he got killed. So maybe what was he correct in doing that or not? That was a big sacrifice. So then I learned recently, I mean, it might be even a Rashi where it says the Bitzalel ben Uri ben Hur, that because Hur did what he did, in that schus, Bitzalel came from him. So Bitzalel, who was responsible for building the Mishkan, that was right. The lineage goes back 2 generations, Uri ben Hur, to show that it was Hur's schus of speaking up at the ego that he had a Bitzalel. So you see that apparently he was correct. If it was, he was rewarded for what he did. Obviously, he was correct. So I think that's an important lesson that, giving up his life, that was the ultimate sacrifice. So we should, do something, even if it's a little uncomfortable or we're worried a little bit what people might say about us. Certainly we shouldn't be worried about that. And we should definitely speak up.
It doesn't seem to me, again, I'm very far away and I don't really have any connection with Baltimore, but it seems to me that the rabbis don't seem to feel any sort of pressure right now. For example, Aaron Glott, who was he's probably like the face of rabbi doctors pushing the vaccines in the States, especially during the COVID years. He's giving us a talk now in a few weeks at the Young Israel of Woodmere in the 5 towns about basically end of life. I think it's a euphemism for euthanasia, but he's talking about making people comfortable at the end of their lives, and he himself is very comfortable. Why is there nobody protesting outside the shul, for example? Why is nobody willing to confront him on camera and ask him a question? How are you really the right person to talk about making people come comfortable at the end of lives? And you have played such a key role in the end of many people's lives, and really putting it on camera, confronting them, not necessarily just sending them an email, but really publicly saying something that may shame them and then sharing it. Is anybody willing to step forward and do something like that? Really taking the next level and being a little bit more aggressive than just, politely sending them an email or a phone call and waiting for them to respond and hoping they respond and being polite. I think at 5 years after COVID, we've crossed a certain time already where they've had the time to do tshuva already. They've had the time to become educated and to retract their opinions, to admit that they made an honest mistake, if it was that, to do some semblance of tshuva. And if they're still stonewalling now and really as obstinate as ever, I think it's time to be a little bit more aggressive.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, now that you think about it, even back in what year was it? I think it was in 2018 when Dr. Paul Offit came to Baltimore to speak at one of the shuls, trying to convince everybody to get the measles vaccine. There was one person who came, and she was like basically protesting. She was stood out in the lobby, handing out material. She was very brave. So yeah, even back then, there are people that will do it. Yeah, I mean, publicly protesting, is that the best way to do it, or publicly sending out letters? I mean, I think each person, whatever they feel is the best, most productive. But yeah, it is a problem. People need to come out and do something more than what
I don't know. I
has
think
been
there needs to be
happening.
a little bit more outrage, considering how many victims there are. Even the victims themselves don't seem outraged enough to do anything. I've often said that if there was a rumor that a rabbi touched one child or may have touched one child, they would fire him immediately, right? Because they wouldn't want to deal with the scandal, the possibility of protecting a child abuser. What these rabbis have done with COVID and other vaccines is incalculably worse than that. And all I hear is sort of crickets chirping. Like nobody seems to be that outraged. Whatever, can't do anything, whatever.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because the child abuse issue, that wasn't always so simple. Like 15, 20 years ago,
Correct.
it was not something that people would
Correct. But even
protest.
so now that we fortunately graduated to the level where child abuse is unacceptable and everybody agrees on that, and we believe that something must be done immediately, right? So they have literally abused children physically with the shots by throwing them out of schools, traumatizing them with masks, and they've done so many more things than that as well. This is so much worse than abusing one child. And yet we all agree that if there's even a rumor, possibility that a rabbi touched a child, we would immediately keep him away from children until at least we could clarify the matter. And now we know with certainty that they've done, so much worse than that. And we're still talking about politely sending them emails, or maybe everybody should just do whatever they think is right. I mean, at what point do we get outraged and say we just have to get rid of these people?
So I think the thing you mentioned is very important. That it has to be the mindset of the society in general has to be that it's unacceptable, right? So with the child abuse, at a certain point, it became, okay, now it's unacceptable.
I think
So
murdering
now,
people I think we should all agree that murdering people and making them very sick and lying to them and falsifying the Torah and working with a Molech and taking bribes, et cetera, that should cross at least one red line.
Right. So how do we change the overall mindset of society? So jumping out and protesting might not do it necessarily. You have to first speak to people individually, and then get your group together. Then you can maybe do it and slowly change things. So yeah. I mean, you're right. It has to be protested, but it has. But the concept behind it, I think, is the basic understanding of society. What's considered acceptable. So we have to change those assumptions. And how do we do that? That's a good question.
I'm asking you. I mean, you're there in Baltimore. You're trying to put together this mediation arbitration. There's zero possibility that these rabbis are going to go for it. I think we both know that. So what's your next step then? They're not going to show up for your mediation, right? You want to call them for a meeting, for a sort of a din Torah. They're not interested. So what do you do now?
Right. Well, I gave up on that before.
We are gods. We've been serving the community. We're heads of the organizations. Why should we show up? Lower ourselves to show up for your little arbitration? Who are you? So
that's what this Rav explained to me already a few months ago, that we're not going to have a formal arbitration meeting. They're not going to show up. It's not going to help. Instead, we're going to publicly basically show everyone that they're wrong. Whether they like it or not.
Do that. Give me really a snapshot of why, not a long legalistic drasha that the average listener may not be able to understand. Just give me, like, really in a nutshell, what your case is against them, like why you think these people are responsible for what they did, why they should show up for an arbitration, why there should be public pressure on them. Why should the public rally be behind this? Give me the sales pitch.
We the people who are in charge of educating the children, they need to stick with their job of educating our children. They're not supposed to be getting involved in medicine. So they shouldn't be forcing people to go through medical procedures that they don't want to. Each person should have the right to make their own medical decisions.
Right, but we know that much of the community, unfortunately, still believes that we don't necessarily have the right to make our medical decisions. We have to defer to the experts. And if all the experts and all the rabbis say we have to do it, so we have to do it for the safety of the children and everybody else. So now what?
Yeah. So one way I usually prove it to people is the Shulchan Aruch, which says that's a good argument. There's different experts on both sides, but the Shulchan Aruch tells us what to do in that situation where you have different opinions of experts. The Shulchan Aruch says that even if there's even two doctors who say that a certain thing is a danger, we have to listen to those two opinions, even if it's against 100 who say that it's not a danger. So we have something called vaccines. Thousands of doctors say that it's a sakana, it's a danger, either because it's never been tested at all officially, or because they have actual evidence that it causes harm and death. Even if you have 1 million doctors who disagree, it doesn't matter. The Shulchan Aruch says we have to be concerned that if it's a minority opinion, that's the halach. We have to be worried about that. That's a pretty clear-cut argument. They try to wiggle out of it and saying, well, but if you don't vaccinate, then there's a danger the other way because of the disease. Well, that's just not true. You go through the diseases. Which disease is a danger? Chickenpox, hepatitis. Maybe we can get the polio. That's one point that we may have a discussion about. But 90%, there's nothing even to talk about. So the Shulchan Aruch, that's a pretty straightforward argument that usually works.
Well, the fact is also that we're dealing with healthy people, and everybody agrees that every medicine has dangers, has potential side effects and dangers. Everybody agrees. I think at this point, everybody agrees that even the so-called gold standard vaccines have some element of danger. Pretty much everybody agrees with that. And they say, nevertheless, the danger is very small. And yet if you get one of these dangerous illnesses, it could be deadly and infect everybody and destroy the whole human race, potentially, right? That's the argument that they make. The problem is that when it comes to halacha, we're not allowed to take a healthy person and inject him with something that may well seriously harm him or kill him because of a speculation that he may get sick in the future or infect other people. We don't have the right to endanger a person's life. If a person is already sick and then a doctor is saying he needs a certain treatment, otherwise he might die, but the treatment carries additional risks, it may kill him sooner. So then we weigh the risks and the benefits, and that's very complex, and has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. But when we're talking about a healthy person who might get sick, who might not get sick, and if he does get sick, it might be very light, he might get better, he might not affect, right? So we have to jump through many hurdles to say, well, he might get seriously ill, he might seriously get other people ill. We're making up stories that don't exist. That doesn't fall into the category of pikuach nefesh anymore. And then to actively potentially harm that person, we don't have the right to do it. Like, for example, even those who say that the smallpox vaccine, you shared a source with me from the Tiferes Yisrael in Yoma, who said that the smallpox vaccine would kill 1 out of 1,000 people. And he said that we are allowed to take it. It's a very difficult source. And I don't think we actually poskin like that. But if we are to say that we have 1,000 people standing here, and I'm going to inject all of them with something, knowing that it will kill one of them. They're all healthy right now. So I know that I'm going to kill randomly one of these 1,000 people because it may protect more people from getting killed. I'm not allowed to do that. That's Molech sacrifice. We are not allowed to do that to healthy people.
The first Shul doesn't say about you doing it to someone else. He's talking about for each individual, are you allowed to take the vaccine?
So he says that they are allowed to do it, but interestingly, he doesn't say that they're obligated to do it, which doesn't even fit with the rest of his logic, because he compares it to a case of jumping into a river to save a drowning person where there's a certain danger, not a spec. So even the logic doesn't work. But I'm just saying that if you have 1,000 people here and you say, I'm going to kill one of these 1,000 healthy people right now, okay, I know that on average, one of these 1,000 is going to die, but I have to do it because maybe it'll save 5 people. We're not allowed to calculate things like that.
Right. But what if, I think what his logic is, if I could take it for myself, because I'm worried, I have a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying from smallpox, from from the vaccine. Sorry, the vaccine is a 1 in 1,000 risk, but the disease is 10 out of 1,000. So I'm taking a small risk to avoid a bigger risk. That's, I think, his basic logic. He goes on to try to prove that, whether you know, you can argue on the proof or not, but that's, I think, the basic logic behind it. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Can I
mean,
do something?
I would say that your own life comes before other people's lives. If you're not allowed to do it to other people, you shouldn't be allowed to do it to yourself either. You know, a person commits suicide is also a murderer. We have to protect our lives as much as we're protecting other people's lives. So if I can't give everybody, give someone else a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying, I can't do it to myself either, because I have a paranoia that I might get sick. We don't find that concept anywhere in Halakha.
Yeah, the argument is Shev Yaltase. It's better not to do anything.
Right.
There's a risk both ways, just better not to do anything. That is brought down in Yoreh De'ah. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, when we're dealing
that.
with healthy people, especially children that aren't even at risk in most of these cases, how do they justify saying, I know that I'm going to kill some children because it will hopefully long run be overall better numbers? We say hands off.
Right. So, Rav Moshe in the Tshuva talks about preventative medicine, which is like vaccines as an example. He also comes out saying it's mutter. Now, it's interesting how he writes it. He says his assumption is that it should be usher. But he says, no, he comes out with an interesting proof that it's mutter. It's mutter. Again, it's not, there's no obligation. But he does say it's mutter. Now, he wasn't aware of necessarily any evidence of serious harm that the vaccines cause. It could be now today, if he saw how, you know, that the fact that they didn't even test them for safety, and all the evidence of harm, very likely he would agree with what you're saying, that no, we're not going to put yourself into that risk to avoid a disease, which is probably even less dangerous. But that tshuva is interesting, where he does say that the preventative medicine is permissible.
Right.
But
And Rav Moshe and also all the other poskim who ruled at least somewhat in favor of taking these types of treatments were all working with the assumption that the information given to them was accurate, that the people giving it to them themselves knew what they were talking about, that the numbers were actually properly tested and verified, that the people weren't being bribed along the way, that there was no conflict of interest. They assumed everything was pure. I'm giving you a case. If all of this is true, then what would the Jewish law be? But if there's a problem with the information or the people giving you the information, then you throw everything out.
For sure. See, but it's hard to make that argument, because then you're making
On the contrary, I think it's very easy to make that argument. We know today how doctors learn nothing about vaccines and the actual science behind the vaccines. We know that there's a great financial vested interest involved. The doctors will be penalized if they don't give vaccines. Like if they form their own opinion that goes against the narrative, they're going to lose their medical license. So, I mean, when you have all of these and so many other factors involved as well, the information that we're given in favor of vaccines is just not trustworthy according to Jewish law.
Right. But the way I see it is, you have to assume you're talking to Egyptians. The Egyptians, like I said, like by kingdom, you have to, if you argue, well, you can't trust doctors anymore, they'll say, no, we still trust our doctors. They're not lying.
Moshe himself didn't trust doctors. I mean, poskim throughout Jewish history said we don't trust doctors. Doctors are here to give us information, and then the rabbi decides what the Jewish law is. Today, it's just the opposite.
Right.
Today, the rabbi is saying just trust the doctors. The doctors have a blank check. They have outsourced all of their knowledge and rulings to doctors and to the government and to the military experts, right? The experts in every area, poskim, everything, and the rabbi is just there to give them a rubber stamp. It used to be no. The experts would come to the rabbi, give them the case, and then the rabbi would ascertain whether the information given to the doctors is trustworthy enough and rule accordingly. The rabbi was the one making the ruling, not the doctor.
Right, that's a good argument. That's how it always works. The doctor was
simply a witness. That's all he was. And either we trust this witness or we don't trust the witness.
Right. I made that argument before also. If you have a question about a certain gadget that's, you know, a new invention, can I use it on Shabbos? So if I call the manufacturer, I'm not going to ask a Shiloh, can I use it on Shabbos? It's a guy, you know, he doesn't know. You ask the expert, how does it work? They give you the facts. Then you take the facts, and then you look at the Shulchan Aruch and see what the halacha is. It's the same thing here. The doctor is the expert. We can find out what the facts are, but we're not going to ask him what to do about it.
Yeah, and we have every right to cross-examine the witness. In fact, we're obligated to do that. The doctor is simply a witness. All of these experts are expert witnesses at the very most. they're not making rulings. We're obligated to cross-examine them. And if they turn out to be pasala edus, if they're disqualified from testifying because they're known liars, or they have a history of taking bribes, or they're otherwise corrupt, then we throw out their testimony. We just don't listen to them. And this is basics of Jewish law.
But I think even a more basic point, to convince people who are, like I said, they're brainwashed. It's hard to get through to them. More than convincing that they're lying, show them that they admit it. We say, Hodas Baldin Kameya Aiden, right? If the defendant admits it in court, that's it. The case is closed. He already admitted it. So all these top experts, they admit most of what we're saying, they admit to. They admit they never did any basic safety study on vaccines. That's it. There's no safety. Now they say, well, but in their opinion, it's still safe. We still think it's safe. Fine, but that's your opinion. The fact that you're testifying to is it was never tested for safety. That halakhically, that's a big problem.
Right.
They admitted it. They admit to that. Yeah, all these arguments are good. They're all for people like us. We are, we're in a healthy situation. Any of these arguments are very convincing, but you have to just for these other people who are not convinced yet, you have to know what will get through to them. They have a
So
thick
the rabbis of Baltimore, when you've given these and other arguments to these rabbis, what has been their typical response? I mean, they have to receive. You've met some of them personally, as you write about. So what's been the reaction from them? They can't just say, "I don't want to listen." They have to.
So
say
without going through all the details, I'll tell you, the short version. It's very amusing. I sat down, and I won't say their name.
Why not?
I think it's lashon hara. Is it
really? I'm asking you, is it really lashon hara?
Point.
These people have a history of basically murdering Jews and then falsifying the Torah and lying about it. I think it's a mitzvah to publicize them. We should know who our enemies are. I think these people are wicked and they're corrupt, and they should be named, and they should stand by their opinion. The fact is, let me just say this point, and then I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, when Rav Moshe Feinstein or any other rabbi who's genuine gives a ruling, they were all accessible. Rav Moshe Feinstein was much greater than any of these rabbis today, and much more busy than any of them. And yet he was always available when people had a question about one of his rulings. He was always available. You could just pick up the phone and call him. Okay, Rav Avigdor Miller was very accessible. All of the great rabbis were always accessible. And these people, because they have an office somewhere and they take photo ops with the local mayor, they're suddenly too busy and too important and godlike to speak to the peasants. They just issue their rulings from on high, and they don't have to answer to anybody. It doesn't work like that. If a rabbi is unwilling to answer genuine questions about his rulings, you throw out the ruling and you throw out the rabbi.
I agree, and that's what convinced me early on, that they weren't responding, and even the few answers that they gave were ridiculous. That's really what convinced me originally. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a big problem.
I think it's a mitzvah to say who their names are and let them speak up for themselves. If they have something to say, they're welcome on this program, and let them justify what they've done.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind publicizing what they said. Let everyone else learn from that and see how obviously wrong they are. Okay, if they want to respond at some point, let them. But they haven't. I mean, I hear what you're saying. So, but just to share with everyone, it was just really funny. So I sat down with the Rav for an hour, went through this tshuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein, went through it inside, and we so this is what he comes out. The conclusion seems to be like this: that at best it's permissible to do this preventative medicine, but in certain situations he actually is saying that it's usher in this situation where, without getting into the detail, he's saying if you're not worried, it's only permissible if you are doing it with the intention of preventing the illness, and because you're doing it because you're worried about getting sick, then there's a heter, it's mutter. But if you're not worried about the illness, it's going to be usher. So, for example, if I'm not worried, I'm not scared of chickenpox, I'm not scared of hepatitis, for me, it's going to be usher to do it. So my question therefore is, you're saying that the schools are doing the right thing by forcing kids to do something that's usher for them? It's like, that's impossible.
I would add on and say, by the way, that in such a case, the treatment is not actually treating an illness, it's treating fear. They're not taking this, right? If you're only allowed to take it because you're afraid of getting sick, then you're actually treating fear.
Right. For sure. So how do they get out of it? They have to, like you said, they have to answer something. They can't just ignore what Moshe said. Then no, he's not talking about can you take preventative medicine. He's talking, or can you take a vaccine? Is it most take a vaccine? He's talking about can you take a? Is it? His whole question is, are you allowed to? Are you allowed to take a vaccine on Yom Kippur? So you have to look through it. There's, if you're half asleep and drunk, you can maybe read it that way because in the beginning, there is a question about Yom Kippur. The question has to do with a person who is sick and he wants to inject an IV so that he's able to fast. So he discusses that, and then he changes the topic to the medicine. So if you're drunk, you can maybe explain it that way. But anyone who reads it, you'll know right away that that's totally not an acceptable way of reading it. He's not talking about are you allowed to vaccinate on Yom Kippur. And the other one who I spoke to is even funnier. He said, no, he's not talking about if you're allowed to vaccinate. He's talking about are you allowed to carry vaccines on Shabbos? He actually said that. And the reason why that came up, Shabbos comes up, he does mention one of Rav Moshe's proofs happens to be from this, it's called Evan Tekuma. It's this obscure halacha in Shabbos, which says that a pregnant woman, there's these rocks, apparently these rocks had some kind of segula to prevent miscarriage, and she's allowed to carry it, even if it doesn't make sense. And even if she's not pregnant and she never had a miscarriage, she's still allowed to if it makes her feel good. But his proof from there is that that your intention means a lot. So from there, you see that if your intention is to take the medicine in order to avoid getting sick, then you have the status of a sick person, even though you're not really sick, and therefore it's mutter. So that's his argument. But he said, oh yeah, he's talking about carrying vaccines on Shabbos. Yeah. And yeah,
these arguments are clearly nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and he even got angry at me. So and you're twisting Rav Moshe's words because you have an agenda. As he said to me.
Okay, so you put this up. You're putting this up for the court of public opinion. At least you can see the comments over here from our live audience. They want the rabbis to be named, and I think if you want to put anything up, the court of public opinion would agree that in theory, if what you're saying is true, these arguments are nonsense. But what do we do with that, right? How do we know that they said these things? Who are these people? What are we supposed to do with the information? If you really want to put something before the court of public opinion, I think you need to identify who you're talking about, what they did, and challenge the public to, take the next step.
Well, that's what I did. That's
these rabbis to then respond publicly to what you're saying, sort of force their hand. Otherwise,
I did that with the letter.
Stories.
So this letter that I wrote that has 5 people named on there. That's public, and you shared that already. These things are like
I shared the letter, but nothing happened because you share it to an email list. People read it and say, "Wow, Nebuch, that's terrible." But I mean, if you really want to take the next step, you got to take.
Yeah, we have to organize and make phone calls, and we have to get together.
You don't know who you're organizing against. Let's say I want to make. I don't know who to call. You're not naming anybody. Who do I call?
Yeah, there's 5 individuals with their email and phone number, cell phone.
Okay, so if you're willing to say it in writing and have it emailed around, why aren't you willing to identify them here? Like, what do you? I don't understand.
No, it was these additional cases where we had this funny conversation. I don't know. I'm not sure if that is the most crucial thing to point out.
I don't know why. I mean, if there are rabbis out there that are saying things like that make no sense, then I think we should know who they are. They're saying things that really endanger people's lives and are irresponsible and completely falsify them. Why are we protecting them exactly? I don't understand.
No, I'm not saying they should be protected, but
you're protecting them. The court of public opinion is that these people should be exposed and we should do something about it, but we don't know who they are. So what are we supposed to do? So that's a terrible thing. Oh, some bad rabbis out there. Terrible. Okay, so
no, I think these 5 are a good start. These are a good start. These are the main. I've in our community, what I found, these are the main ones that were pushing all this.
So then, who are they? And what we have an audience here. People are going to watch the program and tell me who they are and what you'd like people to do. If they agree that these rabbis are wrong and that they said things that are very against the Torah and endanger the Jewish community, let me know who they are and what you think people should do about it. Otherwise, we're just telling stories.
Okay, I'll read it. I have it here. Rabbi Hopfer he's the head of the Vada Rabbanim. Oh, Rabbi Moshe Hauer, that's a good one. He's not part of the Vada Rabbanim anymore. I think he moved to the OU. But he was the one who wrote that letter from 2018, saying that saying what happened.
Take the shots. You can throw the kids out of school, and you're not part of it.
Yeah, and saying that this is what every rabbi said, even though they didn't. Dr.
Well, how come the
Jacobowitz.
other rabbis, if somebody published something in my name that was so terribly wrong, I would set the record straight. So if this meeting
I
really
mentioned
never
that.
happened and they never said these things, why have these other rabbis kept silent? It would seem
That's
that they
that's
agree whether the meeting happened or not. If they're publishing statements in their name
right.
like
Right.
that, if these
Here's
rabbis
another
said, no,
thing.
I didn't say that.
Now, so another thing that I wanted to, we learned from Mitzrayim is when they were drowned, the Egyptians were drowned in the sea. So it says that some of them had a difficult death and some of them had a quick death. So each person, they weren't all at the same level. Each one had different levels of what kind of punishment they deserved.
So, I mean,
Well, here
Hashem
too.
can decide which level of hell all these rabbis are going to. I'm not really concerned. That's not my problem. I just want to get
Right.
them away from us. And then Hashem could put them in whatever chamber of hell is hot enough for each of them. That's between God and them. Right
But
now, we have to get the evil out of our midst.
To some degree, we can discern, like, okay, if it's a rabbi who was pushing everyone to do this, that's definitely more serious.
So a rabbi
If it was
who,
a rabbi
to me, they're
who
all
just
murderers, abusers, falsifiers of the Torah. There's different levels. To me, they're all just
Right.
out. Just get them out. All of them. Just take a big broom and sweep them all
Yeah.
out. I'm not interested who's the biggest Russia, who's the middle manager, who's just a coward. Just get rid of all of them. I don't know why
Well,
we
you
can't
start from the
do that.
top. If you get the top few levels, and that's really the main thing, and then the rest will.
Well, we're not even, people
Yeah.
aren't even willing to go after the lower hanging fruit. I mean, I don't think you have to go after, I've been saying all along, people say, oh, go after Fauci. Fauci should be prosecuted. You should have war trials, war crimes, Nuremberg trials. They say, if you're not even able to get rid of your local shul rabbi with 15 Altakakers in the room, and you can't even do anything about him, I don't want to talk about going after the head guys.
Yeah.
I mean, these
right.
people are very low hanging fruit. The government is not going to protect them. Okay. They're very weak people. And if people aren't even willing to go after them, they're little local schnook of a rabbi who doesn't know anything and they don't really respect anyway. They're not even willing to go after him. Why should we bother talking about going after the heads of the organizations?
You're right. We have to. We know we all need to get up and do something about this. I agree.
That's why I'm saying name them all, the big ones, the small ones. Go after all of them. Why do we have to pick and choose our targets? Anybody who advocated for killing the Jewish people and took bribes to do so, or was too cowardly to say the right thing, is not fit to be a rabbi. They should be named and shamed, and we should get rid of them. Why is that so difficult for us to do? If a rabbi gets up in shul and outlaws kiddush clubs, and in the Western world, okay, outlaws kiddush clubs or outlaws talking during davening. Does anybody who talks during davening, we're throwing him out of shul? They would fire him the next day. That's going too far, right? It's being too strict. Who outlaws their kids playing basketball on Shabbos afternoon? Rabbi can't say that, right? Who outlaws the women who don't cover their hair? No, we can't talk about such things, right? We're more liberal minded. Rabbi's got to be more tolerant. For that, a rabbi would get fired. But for actually killing people, literally killing people, as Glott did, he was involved in the medical manslaughter of somebody, and there's court documents that back this up. That's fine. That's okay. That's tolerable. For literally abusing countless children, that's okay. I don't understand why this has to be an argument. Why do I even have to argue about this?
It's been an argument since Har Sinai, right? I mean,
no, it hasn't been an argument against Har Sinai because we have not had murderer rabbis roaming our midst since Har Sinai. We've had bad people, we've had false prophets, fine. But we haven't had rabbis literally working with Amalek, being traitors to the Jewish people, falsifying the Torah in these extreme ways. And they'll get fired for going against the Kiddush Club, but they won't get fired for forcing your child to wear a mask and traumatizing him and then injecting him with poison. That's acceptable. That we just have to keep a low profile and be very gentle.
Right. I'm wondering, is the question is the solution to protest and fight against the rabbi, or is it to fight against those Rishoyim in the Kehillah who are
all of them? They're all Rishoyim. To me, they're all the same. I don't understand why I'm the only one who's willing to go to Asher Weiss on camera and ask him, what do you have to say to all the people who took those shots and are now seriously harmed or dead? What do you? I'm the only one who's willing to go up to him on camera and say that. Right? I'm telling people, go up to Glott and ask him this question. What do you have to say to the family of Deborah Bucko? You're talking about end of life. Did you make her end of life as pleasant as possible when you gave her remdesivir and denied her ivermectin, even though she had a prescription for it and court orders to give it to her, and you fought tooth and nail to give a dying patient medicine that she desperately wanted to have when everything you were doing wasn't working anyway? You had nothing to lose at that point. Ask him that question on camera. Why is that so out of bounds? Why? I don't understand why I'm the why I'm this big, brave warrior who's willing to ask a question to a rabbi that may make the rabbi uncomfortable. Seriously, when did the Jews lose all their courage? I don't understand. I shouldn't be brave for asking these questions. It's really not that brave. It's not.
Well, like I said, I mean, I would suggest that maybe what you could do is, get together 3 people or 5 or 10 people, and then go back to Rabbi Weiss and get 100 people, build it up.
Well, I've been. You know what? I'm. Who else is willing? You keep talking about Egypt. Moshe and Aaron
Well, I
went to
don't.
confront Paro, and all this kingdom, all the elders are following him. Yeah, we're going to go confront Paro. Hashem said,
Right.
send my people out. And by the time they got there, all the elders had slipped away. It was just them.
Right. So you see, it's been a problem since the beginning. We
Yes and no. We have had periods in Jewish history where the people have had much more courage, and Jews today, supposedly, the Jews are willing to go to Gaza and to death traps and get blown up for nothing. I mean, Jews are not afraid of taking risks. Jews are not afraid of doing things that are very frightening. And again, they're not afraid of confronting a rabbi. Rabbis can do a lot of things that'll get them in hot water that are much lesser than this. And people don't have such a great level of respect for their local shul rabbis. They really don't. They don't. They don't worship the local shul rabbi.
Right.
So why is this something that we're not willing to confront them over? Why is it too uncomfortable? I don't know. I'm not asking you. I'm really just throwing the question out to everybody. It's just on my mind. Why is this something that's out of bounds?
They mentioned Gaza, something like that. So they point out with Avraham Avinu, where that wasn't even one of the 10 nisyon, going into the fiery furnace. That might not even be counted as one of the 10 tests, because to give up your life in a certain sense might even be easier than to living al Kiddush Hashem, right? To going out and fighting every day is even harder in a sense. So, but yeah, why is it hard? I don't know. That's just human nature.
I don't know. I mean, at this
nature.
point, I think the people that are not willing to do anything about this share in the crimes of these rabbis, because it doesn't take that much. Not risking their lives to question a rabbi on camera about their ruling and sort of force the rabbi to give an answer, or by just stonewalling and walking away. That's also an answer. And just sharing it. The rabbi is obligated to justify his rulings, and if anybody is sincerely asking him a question, here's what the Torah says, here's what you say, it doesn't fit, please explain. And if they refuse to do that, that should be public knowledge. The rabbi has an obligation. If he expects people to follow his rulings, he has to back up those rulings. The rabbi is not some prophet who just says the word of God and we have to blindly trust him. And even a prophet has checks and balances. Even a prophet can be executed if he steps out of line. These rabbis are not as great as their predecessors. They're not as great as the prophets.
Yes, I'm suggesting that perhaps what we could do, what I'm going to do right away, and maybe what you could do is find 2 or 3 of your closest people and do it together. Then gather more people together.
Well, I'm not in
build it up.
Baltimore. There were a couple of people
Right.
that are willing to confront rabbis, but it's very, very small in number. I've been urging people for the longest time all over the world to do this, begging people to confront their rabbis. I'll post the videos. I'll share it. They can be polite and respectful in the way they ask the questions, not yelling and screaming and cursing, but politely ask the rabbi an uncomfortable question that he's still obligated to answer, and make him answer the question, or walk away, do a walk of shame, and share it with people. These rabbis, if the rabbis are going to make life and death decisions for the Jewish people, and they're going to get it wrong, they have to face the consequences. There's no free passes here.
For sure. But like Moshe and Aaron, they went themselves. They set the example.
Moshe and Aaron were dealing with Paro, a dictator who could have executed anybody with a wave of his hand.
Right.
Your local schnook rabbi can't do anything. He's a nobody.
Certainly.
Seriously, your local shul rabbi is a nobody. He has no power, really. His power only is to the extent that people are going to listen to him, which they really don't anyway. That's the truth. People don't listen to rabbis as much as we imagine that they really do. People in the end do, most of what they want to do anyway. They don't have a tremendous amount of respect for the rabbis. The rabbis are not emperors and dictators who can take off people's heads. Okay? They're regular people like everybody else who are trying to make ends meet and get by, and they're desperate for the shul to not fire them. So there's no reason why we have to be so intimidated by confronting a rabbi. Rabbis have been confronted for far less than the things that they've done here.
Right, but there's a big difference. What I'm saying is that the difference between telling everyone what to do or doing it yourself, like you have done, and I've been doing, and now you got to bring people with you, like Moshe and Aaron. They brought the Zakanim with them. Now, the people who have the courage have to bring the people with us hopefully they won't chicken out this time.
Okay, so then
Because-
let's wrap everything up here. Bottom line, you are starting this mediation initiative. What exactly do you want people to do in Baltimore?
Well, you talking about with this letter that I put out?
Well, you're starting an initiative. You're now putting this before the court of public opinion. You have a long-term goal, I assume, of arbitration/mediation, making them speak before the public and justify themselves. We're not near that point where they feel enough pressure to do so. So how can people participate in what you're doing and make things move forward already?
Well, in Baltimore, you're talking about in Baltimore?
Yeah.
Really anywhere, anywhere, wherever you are.
But I'm talking about Baltimore because you've now stepped forward to do something in Baltimore. So now what do you want your neighbors to do?
Yeah. I think we need to have a discussion, and we have to work together, and we have to
Well,
speak
what
up.
does that mean in practical terms? Are you
It means
meeting in
I'm-
the shul sometime? Are you making a meeting? Like, how could people do that? What's the next step
Yeah,
for
I think-
people?
I
Watch
think
this and say, yeah, he's right. I want to help. What should
So in
people
our
do?
yes, in our community, I think I'm going to start making calls. We know who we are. We're going to contact everyone who we know is on our team, and
But
we'll
that's
organize
already
some-
like a closed, anonymous circle. I don't know who your team is. I don't know. I'm just saying, how
Right.
do you're
But
putting
each
this
community-
before the public. So what
in
do you
each
want the
com- I
public to
think
do?
Each person in their own community has to do the same thing. You have to speak to whoever you know agrees with you, and get organized and speak. Each person has to make other phone calls and get as many people as you can to work together. Approach the rabbis in groups. The larger the group, the better. You can make phone calls, you can send emails, yeah, and you can go in person, but you have to work in groups. If you have the numbers,
Well,
the
you've
more
already started a group. So how do people join your group and go with you?
well, you can send me an email or call me.
All right. You
And
want to
we'll-
tell
and
people
we'll-
how to do that? How people can get in touch with you and share the link to your letter? Let's
Yeah,
make it easy
All
for
right.
people.
yeah. I can share links on this.
You can share the links in the chat, and I'll put it in the description of the recording.
I'm on my phone though. I'm connected on my phone. I don't know. It's
All
not be that easy.
You want to just
but-
say it? You want to say how people
Yeah.
can contact you or contact the organization that you've set up?
Yeah, you could send me. So the website is mishpattzedek.org.
How do we spell that?
mishpattzedek.org. And then there's a contact page with the email, phone number, my cell phone. I'll give you my cell phone. It's 443-468-6269. You can text or call or WhatsApp. But yeah, in Baltimore, people know how to contact me. But yeah, each community, yeah, even if you're in other communities, feel free to call the people that I have on this list, on the letter. But I think it's really more of a community thing. Each community, like you in Israel, you
Sure.
have your people, you work together, and we
Right. I'm
Yeah,
not
I think
taking
that's-
care of Baltimore. I'm leaving Baltimore in your hands.
Yeah, we have to just speak. The founders of the Constitution, they always talk about the freedom of speech. I think there was a lot of chachma behind that. They understood that in every society, there's going to be the government or people that they're evil. Evil always exists, and without the freedom of speech to speak up, there's no chance of surviving. You have to have that ability, and we have to make use of it. We have to speak up.
Well, they wanted to take away our freedom of speech during COVID, and they're still trying. So they're
right.
certainly aware of that.
Yeah, they know how important that is. That's the first thing they go after is censorship. Yeah, but we have to organize and we have to speak up. That's the bottom line.
Okay. Well, I hope I wish you a lot of success in your project. I hope the troops will be rallied both in Baltimore and all the other Jewish communities around the world to organize, to rise up, to speak up, to take out the trash. Right? That says in the Torah in multiple places that we have to drive the evil out of our midst. That's our job to do. We have a mitzvah. It's not Hashem's mitzvah. It's not the job of Mashiach to do it. We have a mitzvah. We have evil in our midst. We are responsible for doing something about it. If we make excuses and look the other way, then we share the responsibility for that evil.
That's right. We have to do that. There's no question.
All right. So Rabbi Sendro, thank you very, very much for taking the initiative, for stepping forward, for being a leader. I hope other people will follow your lead and get in touch with you. And I hope others all over the world will do the same thing.
Okay. God willing. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We should do this again sometime.
Amen. Okay, Lowell. I think Lowell had to go early. So we'll just wrap up the program now. I see a lot of comments. Let's just scan quickly for any questions. You're welcome to do the same. Let's see. Somebody wanted to know if you were approached to appear in that infamous Baltimore Five Towns video, take the shots, take the shots, take the shots. You're not actually a practicing rabbi now, so I assume that you were not. But he says, are you aware of any other Baltimore rabbis that refuse to take part in this propaganda video?
I know of the ones who weren't on their video. I don't know if they were specifically approached and refused to do it. Maybe one, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, there were,
That's
the majority of them
it would be good to know about also. Maybe that rabbi would be an advocate and would step forward as well, because he at least had the guts to refuse. Maybe he should speak out. People need to speak out about these things. When rabbis are seriously reading from a script, you talk about the Gedolim like Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe Feinstein would never go on a propaganda video sponsored by the government, and God knows who else was paying for it, saying, take the shots, it saves lives. They would not debase the Torah and their positions as leaders by reading from some script that some God knows who wrote for them. It's just embarrassing for a rabbi to do that. And we assume that there was probably some money involved or some favors involved. They probably didn't do it for nothing, because we know how things work. A real rabbi would never do something like that. It's shameful.
It's a disgrace. Yeah. One question here is, how does one bring these rabbis before a Beis Din? Is there a rabbinical court that exists in present day that could even hear a case against the rabbis who use their positions? Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, Beis Din should have the power to take. No one's above the law, but practically, not necessarily. That might not necessarily be true today.
Especially because many of these rabbis themselves would be the ones running the local courts, and they're not reliable anyway. So, unfortunately,
it would be hard. Yeah.
No, well, hopefully the time will come.
Yep.
All right. So I appreciate your time, Rabbi Sendro. Appreciate everybody for participating. We'll wrap up the recording now.